Hello. Today on my channel, Touching Stories, you will hear an amazing story about love and friendship. I hope you like this story, because this is a story I heard in a meeting with my former colleagues, and it struck me to my heart. Do you want coffee? Ross asked. No, I'm in a big hurry. I had breakfast at work, Richard answered, and looked intently at her husband. For a long time now, he had refused to eat breakfast at home. She didn't know what it was about. And I made you a delicious breakfast. Your favorite pancakes. You really like them, don't you? Maybe I should wrap them for you at work. Ross smiled, expecting her husband to be pleased with her concern, but her expectations were not met. Richard sighed irritably. What are you making up? Didn't even carry boxes of lunches to work. What am I, some schoolboy? Do you want to be laughed at? I know you don't even think about it, but I'd advise you to be a little smarter than that. I'm way past the age where my mom used to make me breakfast at school. In fact, I haven't liked pancakes in a long time. We have a fine dining room where you can order any dish of healthy and wholesome food. And there is nothing healthy about pancakes. And I advise you not to put on them. Otherwise, you'll have even more trouble with your figure than you have now. Ross looked at herself at a loss, looking at all sides. What was wrong with her figure? She didn't seem to be fat. Richard picked up his substitute bag where he put his important papers and documents. He quickly looked at himself in the mirror, scrutinizing every detail of his clothes. He adjusted his tie and hummed contentedly, smiling slightly. How pleased was he with himself. Richard grabbed his wallet, his phone, and his car keys. Without even glancing in his wife's direction, he sparingly tossed her everything goodbye and rushed off. Do not wait for me today. We will have a meeting early in the morning. The chief will make a reprimand to everybody, and I, as the most responsible and perfect employee, will have to calm him down. And Richard left. Ross stood by the window. She was looking outside, seeing her husband off, absent, mindedly running her finger over her mug. Her gaze froze. Her husband had already left, and she continued to stare after him. She was still thinking about what Richard had said. Did she have some kind of problem with her figure? Well, yes. She wasn't as slim and trim as she had been in her youth. But she wasn't even 20 years old anymore. Okay, she's not old. She's only 38. But you have to consider that she's not as active as she used to be. She's a housewife sitting at home, cooking, cleaning, suffering from idleness. Isn't she like other women? She doesn't need to spend endless hours in beauty salons to feel confident. She has enough of the treatment she does at home on her own. Ross flinched when the phone rang abruptly. She picked up the phone, but the answer was silence. Once again, there was silence. Ross began to lose patience. Who was it? If you call again, I'll file a police report, and you'll still be found out. The answer to her was a ringing tone. Ross disconnected the phone and banged the receiver on the table. I'm sick of this. What do they want? She told her husband about the calls, but he brushed them off. Never mind. There are a lot of fools. Maybe it was someone from work. I have some competitors who'd like to have a reputation like mine and take my place. But that takes years of hard work. Never mind, Ross. Richard took a long time to get a reputation. Medicine isn't the most lucrative business in the beginning, and then it's a matter of luck. Richard started out as an orderly during college. At night he was on duty in the emergency room. It wasn't the best job, but the kid was motivated. Then he was accepted as a nurse, and after graduation he became a doctor. But he did not like working in such a place. The salary was small, and he had a lot of work to do, no free time, and no development. At the hospital, Richard met a patient who later became his wife. She was Ross. The girl fell in love with the young surgeon doctor, and he fell in love with her too. They got married quickly, and then Richard resigned from the hospital, and they moved to another city. And so began Richard's difficult journey as a doctor. He changed several places of work anywhere he did not like. Surgeon is a promising profession, but only if you work in the right place. And Richard never found the right place. The family was always short of money. Children were out of the question. Richard got angry when Ross brought it up. "What children? Do you know what you're saying? We ate our own food and provided for ourselves. What if the baby comes, you go on maternity leave? And what will we do? And what will we do? I won't be able to work around the clock. A man needs rest, you know? And I'm not a robot to do operations without a break. And please, don't talk about the baby anymore. You're just getting angry and upset. I don't feel well enough as it is. Also, you and your proposals and Ross didn't start any more of these conversations." The couple waited for better times. Ross supported her husband as best she could. And Richard was grateful to her for that. Not every woman would share her husband's troubles and hardships, but Ross did it out of love for her husband. Shouldn't a wife do that? The situation changed about 5 years ago, at some conference in another city where Richard was sent on a business trip. He met a nationally known surgeon. He did not know him, but Richard was not afraid to try his luck. He approached him himself and introduced himself. The cheeky young doctor took a liking to the professor. Richard reminded him of himself in his youth. The professor, too, was seeking his own authority and high position in the medical society. So he suggested that he move to New York, where the professor could find him a good position. Richard jumped at the idea. Ross couldn't even say anything. Her husband didn't ask her opinion. She quit her job, and they just moved to New York. And the professor found him a place with a friend of his at an expensive and famous clinic. So Richard started working in a very prestigious place. And here he began to make good money. From the very beginning, Richard won the trust of the owner of the clinic, David. The young surgeon was an excellent doctor. His experience in various hospitals where Richard had to operate one by one was telling. He had a good hand and gained invaluable experience. There were very few such doctors in the city. Everyone tried to go straight from college to prestigious places, but Richard had seen a lot in his practice, and now he was able to cope with any operation. Very quickly, Richard and Ross became rich. They bought a nice mansion. They had nice cars. Ross could now get away with not working. Richard wanted her to stay home. She didn't resist. She wasn't very comfortable in a city that was new to her. This big city scared her, and she was even more afraid of working. Who was she here? Just another hick. It was the same with her husband, who had quickly settled into the big city. He had aspired to it all his life. And now he was glad of his success. He was in his own milieu. Ross woke up from the memories that it was me, like an old grandmother, sitting and suffering. I've got work to do, but what business is there if she ain't got nothing to do? She doesn't need to clean. They have a new cleaning service coming in every week. She doesn't have to cook either. Her husband hardly ever eats at home anymore. He spends more and more time at work. He comes in late. If he was going to eat at home, he would order food delivered from a restaurant, and she didn't even have to over-make up a menu. Although Ross remembered the time when they lived poorly, she remembered it fondly. She often cooked. Her husband admired her cooking skills, and she made him breakfast all the time. And her husband never refused to eat. And now, did she want that? He had been acting strangely lately. Ross even suspected he had another woman, but he didn't smell like someone else's perfume. He hadn't called her a stranger's name. It was probably just a thought. And then the phone rang again. Ross jumped in surprise, for crying out loud, but this time it was her friend whom they hadn't seen in a while. Zoe used to work at the beauty salon, where Ross used to go for manicures. Then she got lucky. She married a wealthy man. And after that, she didn't work anymore. But she and Ross remained good friends. They communicated regularly. Zoe would take her out to dinner at night. But Ross didn't know when Richard was coming. And after talking to her friend, The woman decided to call her husband. He was unlikely to pick up, so Ross called right into his office. If he was free, he would answer. But it wasn't him who picked up. It was some girl. "I'm listening to you." "Hello, could you put Richard on the phone, please?" Ross wasn't expecting what was coming next. "God, how do you all get his number? Who gives it to you? How many times do you have to tell everyone that it's his office number, not his patient number? It's not going to work. You can't get a free consultation over the phone anyway. You have to make an appointment at the clinic for that. I have to tell Alex to get him to look into the matter." Ross is dumbfounded. Who is this girl to tell her off on the phone like that, without even knowing the caller's identity? "I'm sorry, I didn't know you can't call this number. But the thing is, my husband gave me this number and told me I could call it any time. I'm his wife." There was an awkward pause, and then the girl said in a different voice, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you. I didn't know it was you. I'm sorry, Richard's busy. I'll tell him you called. He'll call you back." And the girl hung up. Ross bit her lip thoughtfully. Strange. What was this strange girl's behavior, and what was she doing in her husband's office? And why was she talking so rudely if she was one of the clinic staff? She was one of the clinic staff. She was behaving completely inappropriately. And his assistant couldn't have responded that way either. But then Ross wondered, why did this strange girl call the owner of the clinic by his name? And if she was in her husband's office, what was she doing there in his absence? Ross realized that the old suspicions of infidelity were returning. So how to check things out? I had to meet Zoe, or I would go crazy with these thoughts alone. Ross decided not to think about her husband's possible mistress for the time being, and called her friend. In the evening, she will talk to Zoe. Maybe you can give her some advice, or at least reassure her. In the evening, Ross took a cab to the restaurant. Zoe was already sitting at a table, waiting for her friend. She had lost even more weight. Now with her tall stature, she looked like a model. No one would have said this girl had ever worked as a manicurist before. Now Zoe looked chic. She quickly became accustomed to the good life, learned to enjoy all the pleasures of a rich life. However, this woman was very intelligent and observant. She could find a way out of even the worst situation. When Zoe saw Ross, she jumped up from the couch and threw herself on her neck. "And I missed you so much, darling. I'm so glad to see you. You have no idea. I'm ready to stop by and see you in the morning. I hope you're not driving. I hope you're not driving. I have big plans for tonight." Her wide smile was replaced by a stern grimace. Ross laughed. "Yes, I came without a car and a cab. I want to relax tonight, too." Zoe immediately smiled again and squeezed her friend's hands tightly. "That's good. Everything is going according to plan. I like you a lot today. Come on, sit close to me. By the way, remind me to tell the restaurant manager that the couches are great. I haven't been this comfortable in a long time. And this corner in particular appeals to me. There's no one near us. No one stopping us from having fun and gossiping." And Zoe giggled loudly. Ross couldn't hold back a smile as she looked at her energetic friend. Ross wasn't like that. Although their age difference was slight. Only 4 years old, Zoe was 34. But Ross' energy was much weaker. Apparently, it must be inherent in a person. It was strange that such different women found common ground and became friends. But they were. Zoe was all glowing. She was so emotional she seemed like a young girl. Ross, on the other hand, was reserved, like a mature woman. The hour and a half flew by unnoticed. The women ate dinner and drank 2 glasses of wine. Zoe talked mostly. Her active life was interesting. Ross listened to her with pleasure. Zoe colorfully described this or that trip, so that Ross could clearly imagine every detail. When the flow of stories dried up, Zoe looked intently at her friend and said, quietly, uncharacteristically. I take it you won't start talking on your own, but I can see everything. There's something wrong with you, so you'd better tell me. I won't leave you alone. Let's not waste any time. Ross blushed. I hope Zoe doesn't notice that. What are you talking about? Oh, don't lie to me. You know how many years I've worked with people. I know exactly what's in a person's heart. What's wrong with you? Health problems. Depression. Husband Ross realized that Zoe wouldn't be able to calm down anyway. It would be better to ask her for advice right away. Husband, there's something wrong between us. Don't think I'm crazy. There's no proof of it, but I can feel it. My instincts never deceive me. As unfortunate as it sounds, I think he has another woman, but these are only suspicions that are not supported by anything. Zoe listened to her friend. Ross spoke at length without stopping about the clinic. His late arrival's home, silent phone calls. His dismissive attitude when she reprimanded made her feel immediately better. You know, I realize now that it's all nonsense. I'm making all this up out of idleness. I have to do something. Then I won't have time to look for evidence of things that aren't there. I'm just so stupid. Zoe didn't laugh and support her friend, as Ross expected. She was very serious. Without a shadow of a smile, she uttered, "Why do you think it's all made up? You know, I believe in your intuition. How long have I known you? It's never failed you before. I don't have all night to recount all of it. So, honey, I suggest you think about it. And solving the problem of proof of adultery or fidelity is easy enough. It's not relevant nowadays to follow a person yourself. There are special people for that. They will make everything work clearly and quickly. It's not cheap and very expensive, but it's worth it, believe me. I have a contract with a good detective who could take your case. I'll give it to you if you decide to go all the way." Ross bit her lip. The alcohol made the offer tempting. But how could Ross do that to her husband? They had lived together for so many years, trusted each other, been together for so many years, trusted each other, been together for better or for worse. If she had her husband under surveillance, that would be the end of the trust. And she was proud of the fact that they were honest with each other. "I need to get some air. I'll be right back." Ross got up and headed for the exit of the restaurant. Her head was slightly dizzy. She needed some fresh air outside. She would be back to normal in no time. Zoe didn't follow her friend. She allowed herself to be alone. Ross stood outside for about 5 minutes. It was already dark. Her consciousness cleared a little and she calmed down. She was just about to go into the restaurant when someone called out to her, "Ross, Ross, is that you?" Ross flinched. "Aye." She turned around. The voice was so familiar, and she looked intently at the man standing in front of her. "No, it cannot be, could it be, Leo?" Ross said in amazement. The man in front of her smiled broadly and came close to her. "Do you recognize me?" Suddenly, Leo hugged her tightly and twirled her around. Ross gasped in fright and then laughed. She clutched at the man's shoulders and closed her eyes. For a moment, immersed in memories. Leo was her high school sweetheart. They had been in love with each other in 10th and 11th grade. And then their roads diverged. For 2 whole years of such strong feelings, the whole school knew about their affair. Everyone was sure that it was true love, and they would never break up. They made plans for their future, planning to be together for the rest of their lives. No other option was contemplated. Their parents laughed at the graduation party that they would soon have to have a wedding. Everything was great. But their plans fell apart the moment Leo didn't go to university and was sent to the army. After the army, he never came back to the city. His parents decided to go abroad. They took their son and disappeared. The connection between the lovers disappeared. Ross suffered for several months. Then she realized that life went on and she needed to move on without Roma, without memories, without suffering. And then she met her husband, and the past love simply forgot itself. Above Ross has never met Leo. Life had scattered them in different directions. This unexpected encounter awakened something in Ross's heart. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was right inside her head. Her head was dizzy from the alcohol she had drunk and from the sudden rush of feelings. She opened her eyes and begged Leo, "Let me go. I'm getting dizzy." "No, I can't let you go. It's just unbelievable. How is it that we met in a city where I'm just passing through Japan? Is it fate? No, I'm not just going to let you go. Do you have to have dinner with me?" "Oh, no. I'm here now with a friend and I've already had dinner. I have to go home already. My husband will be worried." Leo immediately let her go. The words about her husband sobered him up, and he immediately pulled himself together. "We're already all right. If you're busy right now. Ross, I really want to talk to you. Please let's meet tomorrow, I'm begging you." Ross wanted to say no, but her mind was still reeling, and she realized that she wanted to talk to Leo terribly. After all, it wouldn't be a date, right? But just a meeting with a good friend from her youth and nothing more. So she agreed. They exchanged phone numbers, agreed to meet the next day, and Ross went back to her friend's table. The conversation did not go well because Ross was in a cloud, remembering her meeting with Roma. Soon the women went home. As Ross was leaving in a cab, Zoe shouted out to her, "Think about the detective. If anything, you can count on me." The next day, Ross got up late. Her husband was not yet home when she returned the day before. Ross didn't wait for him and went to bed. During the night, she heard him come in, but then fell back to sleep. In the morning, he was long gone, and Ross realized that it was a mistake to get up so early to see him off. He doesn't need it at all. She texted Richard to say that she was going out with a friend tonight. He read the message but didn't respond. Ross snorted. "Yeah, why respond if you don't care? Whatever." The day went by unnoticed. Ross changed outfits several times, trying to find the right fit. She didn't know what to do with her hair. Then she caught herself thinking that she was acting like she was going on a date. "Ross, stop. Why? Are you getting yourself all worked up?" Angrily, she said to herself. After all, she didn't have time to change anymore. She was running late. When she got in the cab, she thought there was a lot of traffic around. Cars were barely moving, and she thought she was terribly late. But she arrived 15 minutes early. But Leo was already sitting at the table. Apparently he was afraid of being late too, so he arrived early. When Ross came to the table, Leo got up to hug her. Ross was very tense today. She didn't know what the evening had in store for her. They sat down, ordered. Then they talked about this and that. Ross told her that she was married, that her husband was a highly respected doctor at a prestigious clinic. Leo said that he had never been married. At these words, he stared intently into her eyes, and she was embarrassed by that look. It was as if he was telling her that she was the cause of his loneliness when they had a glass of wine. Ross relaxed a little. They reminisced about their youth, high school, laughing about curiosity, and she felt so good, as if she had returned home after a long absence. She remembered that she had always felt so good and relaxed next to him. And then there was an awkward pause. Leo looked at Ross and she rubbed the stem of her glass thoughtfully. "Have you ever wondered how our lives would have turned out if we hadn't broken up suddenly?" Leo asked her. Ross flinched and looked embarrassed. "What's there to think about? It didn't work out. Why speculate about things that couldn't be? But we planned so much, didn't we? It wasn't our fault we broke up. Things were supposed to be different. I've been thinking about it all my life." "Ross, I don't believe you haven't thought about it." Ross looked away. Yes, she was thinking. Of course, she was afraid to admit it to him. She loved him too much to just forget him like that. When she had met Richard, new feelings had swept her headlong into love, lodged at the bottom of her soul, and she hadn't thought of him for some time. But with each passing year, she thought more and more about what she was living. Life not according to her script, that she was destined for something else. But she had turned from the path and was now forced to live a life not her own. The more she thought about it, the more she tried to rid herself of these thoughts. She had chosen her own husband. She had married of her own free will. It was what she wanted. Lately, her dissatisfaction with married life and her suspicions about her husband's cheating had done their work. She realized that something had to change, and she had to start by looking for evidence of Richard's infidelity or unfaithfulness. If he is pure to her, then she made the right choice in marrying him. And if he's cheating on her, then he doesn't need her anymore. Ross looked at Leo and sighed. You're right, of course. Things could have been different, but they turned out the way they did. There's no point in guessing. I was glad to see you, of course, but you have to leave soon. Do you see how fond our memories are? I'm glad I met you. I remembered my youth. But it's all in the past. We remember, and then we forget again. Leo went a little pale, and then whispered to her, I don't want to forget anything, Ross. Don't you understand that I've never forgotten you? I have always loved you. You are the only one in the world for me. I never fell in love with anybody. I never married because you were all I ever dreamed of. You were always in my thoughts, and I think we met for a reason. Fate itself brought us together again. Only now I won't miss my chance. Ross stared at him, stunned. Her heart was pounding like a hammer on a table. She only shook her head and said quietly to Leo, I'm married. That says it all. I don't know what else to tell you. And please think about what I said. I sense that things aren't going smoothly in your life. You have the face of a woman who is unhappy by the way you talk. I realize that it's not a lack of money or health problems that are to blame. You are unhappy because you are not heard, not understood. I can make you happy. I can take you with me. I will always be there for you. I will never let you go again. If you come with me, I love you. Do you hear me? I really love you very much. Leo took Ross' hand and squeezed it, and she just looked at him with tears frozen in her eyes. Oh, how are you holding that? It's too late. Leo is too late. I cannot leave my husband. I am faithful to him. We've been through too much together. We trust each other. We trust each other. I can't just leave just because you called me. I'm not that smart, you know. Yeah, I know you're not. I love you too much to make you do anything against your will. I don't have to. You have to want to do it yourself. I beg you, think about what I said. I'll leave you every phone number I have. Wherever I am, in what city or country, I will definitely answer one of them. Please. If you suddenly change your mind, please call me and I'll come pick you up from the other side of the earth. Ross peeked through her tears. Was all this really happening to her? As Ross drove home in the cab, she wasn't thinking about Leo. She was thinking about her husband. She broke up with Leo on a touching note. He kept assuring her that he could change her life if she wanted to. But Ross didn't want to ruin her current life, her family relationships, her marriage. Not unless her husband had already ruined everything himself. And for that, she would have to find out for herself. And for that, she would have to find out for herself, not hoping for a chance as Ross pulled up to the house. She dialed Zoe's number. Hi, listen, I'll think about your offer. Give me the phone number of that man you were talking about. I'm going to call him, though. I'm going to call him. I want to know. I'm tired of living in the unknown. She called the detective. The next day, they arranged to meet. And a day later, Ross was sitting in his office. She could barely find the right place. There was no sign on the door. The building itself was unremarkable, as if the detective was hiding his whereabouts. Or knowledgeable people might be able to find him. Most likely, This man only worked by acquaintance. Otherwise, how to explain the fact that he didn't even advertise his services? Ross was sitting in a regular chair. She was cramped because she was very uncomfortable in the place. Across from her at the desk sat the detective. There was nothing on his desk except a thin black folder and a pen. Zoe said his name was Steve. Ross, however, was embarrassed to call him by his first name. "Nice to meet you, Steve." After a short pause, the detective replied. He continued to scrutinize his potential client. Usually, if he did not like clients, he immediately refused his services, citing his busyness. Ross was not the kind of person to whom he mostly rendered services. She didn't look like a rich woman looking for her runaway son or daughter. Nor did she look like a cheating spouse. She was too modest and reserved. It was hard to get the information you needed out of her, and you couldn't get much money out of her. He didn't like working with them. He was more attracted to rich clients. However, Zoe vouched for her friend, told the detective that the woman was able to pay the required amount without any problem, but she needed the help of a professional. So Steve agreed to meet with Ross. And when he saw her, he was amazed to find that she looked a lot like his dead sister. Before he even started talking to her, he already knew that he would help her in memory of his own sister. He would not even charge her money, or would charge her purely symbolically. From the look of the woman sitting in front of him, she wouldn't want him to work for free. "Well, I'm listening to you," he said seriously. Ross was a little confused. She didn't know where to begin such conversation, how to ask for a favor or go straight to discussing payment. "I'm sorry. I don't know where to start," reluctantly she said. Steve kept looking at her. Yes, it was obvious that this was the first time she was asking for this kind of service would have to help her. Otherwise, she would now run away from him without getting the help she needed. And he said to her, already a little friendly, "You start with why you need the services of a detective, and then we'll figure it out as we go along. I need to find out if my husband is cheating on me or not." Quickly, Ross spoke, before she lost her nerve. Well, the reason is quite trivial. Steve could barely contain his smile. No matter what happens in the world, women always want to know that they are the only ones in men's lives. "That's fine. That's my kind of thing. Then tell me why you suspect him of it. Is there any proof? And then we'll get to the personalities. Let's write down everything we need. Personal details of places and hours of work. What kind of car does he drive? When he leaves and when he comes home. I need to know everything." Ross took a deep breath and began to talk. She talked for a long time without stopping. Steve didn't look at her, just took notes. Ross talked so long that her mouth went dry. She was silent for a moment, trying not to get upset. Then Steve pulled out a carafe of water and a glass from somewhere underneath. He moved it to Ross. She poured herself some water, drank it, and thanked the detective. As she continued to talk, Ross thought about how it wasn't so bad, and she had almost calmed down already. When she finished speaking, she was silent, waiting for questions from the detective. But after a minute, he slammed the folder with his notes and said, "Great. I don't even have any questions for you. You've got it all in one place. You're very observant. You didn't leave out a single detail. You told me exactly what I needed to know, and nothing more." Ross smiled timidly. "Then we can say goodbye for a while. I think it won't be difficult for me to find out everything you're interested in. I have your telephone number saved. I'll call you in 2 weeks. What about payment?" "We have to agree on payment." Steve smiled slightly. "I'll take a small advance from you, the rest after the end of our cooperation." The detective wrote something in a small notebook, tore out a piece of paper, and handed it to Zoe. She looked at the paper, surprised so little. "I was told that your services are not cheap. I thought I would even have to pay more in advance." "No, that's enough, and the rest of the fee is not very high either. The cost of my services depends on the complexity of the work. Checking the husband is not included in the list of complex jobs, so the payment is appropriate, especially since you gave me all the information. I do not need to waste time looking for it. Well, I'll say goodbye to you. Wait for my call. The detective began to indicate that the meeting was over. Ross said goodbye to him and left the office. When she stepped outside, she breathed a sigh of relief. The office was so stuffy. All the windows were shut tightly, as if the detective didn't want a word to get out of that room. Ross sat in the car and frowned. With all these problems and thoughts, she had completely forgotten about her husband's birthday, which would be as early as this Saturday. How could she forget like that? Shame. Ross shook her head and started the engine. Strangely enough, Richard came home from work early today. Or rather, not early, but on time. When Ross returned, he was already home. Ross raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Wow, you're early today. Nothing happened, I hope?" Richard frowned at his wife. "What do you mean? Does something have to happen if I get home on time?" "No, nothing much happened. It's just that one operation has been cancelled." "Why was it cancelled?" asked Ross. Richard muttered with some irritation that the patient had some complications. The surgery couldn't be done at the moment. It was postponed for a while until the patient recovered. "What are the complications?" Ross asked again. Richard shouted angrily, "Why do you keep asking questions? You don't know anything about medicine. Why should I tell you something you don't know anything about?" "What kind of interrogation, Ross?" "You're beginning to annoy me." Ross bit her lower lip in anger. "And you used to talk to me, share, communicate, tell me what's changed now. Have I become dumber? Or am I no longer allowed to ask you anything, or are you doing something illegal?" "I don't understand, Richard." My husband immediately calmed down and tried to speak more gently. "What on earth are you making up?" "Of course you haven't gotten any stupider. And I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm just very tired. You see, I work almost every weekend. I don't have much free time. I don't even feel like talking. When I come home and you're asking 1,000,000 questions, well, not 1,000,000, just a few. And we're still a family. Maybe we should talk once in a while. Don't you think so?" Richard was silent. Ross tried to calm down. "Okay, you don't have to get worked up now. There's absolutely no need for that right now. She has another problem to solve, a more global one. I understand you don't want to talk and you're tired and all that. But there's something I need to know. So you have to talk to me. It's your birthday on Saturday. Do you have any plans? Or are we going to spend the day alone?" Richard answered hastily. "Oh yes, I forgot to tell you. I've invited some colleagues from the clinic. Austin can't come, but everyone else will. So we'll have a party on Saturday. And you, when were you going to tell me this on Friday night? Or was I going to find out when all the guests showed up?" Ross flared up. "Oh, calm down. Don't worry about it. I took care of everything. They'll deliver the food from the restaurant and set the table on Saturday. All you have to do is find some helpers and hire a cleaner. Nothing more is required of you." Ross looked at her husband. "What's going on with him? He doesn't seem like himself. Talks so casually. And the birthday party was not pretty either." She was even a little embarrassed that she wasn't the one planning the party. What does she have to be patient about? Soon she'll know everything. Soon she'll know if there's serious cause for concern. Okay, bygones. How many people will be there? What should I be prepared for? Yeah, 15, 20 people. Don't worry. Thank God there's plenty of room. That was the end of their conversation. Wildly, I didn't ask anything else. Richard didn't say anything else. We went to bed in complete silence. Richard only briefly said goodnight to her. Ross responded just as briefly. A wonderful family life. Ross decided to take a few days to prepare for the holiday, or rather, to prepare herself. She went to a beauty salon, had her hair dyed and cut a little. She got a manicure with red nail polish. She even got her eyelashes done. True, with a natural effect, but it was progress. Zoe complimented her when she saw her on the eve of Richard's birthday. "Well, my friend, Did you surprise me? I've never seen you look so radiant. Have you outdone yourself? Bravo. All I have to do is pick out a dress. I have a dress. I bought it last year, but I've never used it. I think it will go well with my outfit. Zoe gave a satisfied chuckle. What girlfriend are you going to make me happy? Tell me, has the detective called yet? No news. Ross frowned. No news yet. Should call in the middle of next week. I'm a little worried. Zoe, what's in store for me? In fact, Ross was very nervous. She hoped the detective wouldn't bring her bad news. And if he did, what then? That's life. You'll get through it. But I think you'll be fine. And you don't have to worry. I hope so, Ross smiled. But there's a creak of the cat on her soul. It was Saturday. Richard was right. He had arranged things in the best possible way. Ross didn't have to worry about anything. The preparations for the evening were very summative, but it was nothing. The only thing that frightened her, she did not know any of the people present. And anyway, why had Richard thrown the party at home? They could have done it in a restaurant. Why did Richard have everyone at home? Everyone was there. The champagne flowed like a river. The buffet was set, and the hors d'oeuvres were on the tables. There was laughter all around. Richard introduced her to some of the guests, and then she took a moment to pop into the bedroom to catch her breath. Looking at herself in the mirror, Ross sighed. Yes, she thought she would shine in that dress. But she just didn't know what outfits the other guests would be wearing, compared to the other women's fancy dresses. Her dress was too plain and dull. Richard said nothing to her about her appearance, but his gaze slid carefully over her face. And then he whispered, "What's wrong with your eyes?" Ross answered in bewilderment. She had her eyelashes done. Why? That's another made-up you never did. Why did you put them on now? They do not suit you. Take them off tomorrow. Do you look like a cheap doll from an antique store? Well, Ross didn't expect any compliments from her husband. She was offended, but held back. She said nothing to her husband, just shrugged and stepped aside. Now, standing in her bedroom, she wanted to cry. She wanted to tear off all her jewelry, strip her dress into rags, do her hair, wipe off her makeup, and tear out those damn eyelashes. But she held back. The party wasn't over, and Ross didn't want to embarrass herself in front of everyone. She didn't want to be the talk of the clinic and the surgeon's crazy wife. Ross calmed down and left the bedroom. When she walked out into the hall, she saw another guest next to Richard. She hadn't been there before. She must have just arrived now. It was a young girl. She was so dazzling that she made any woman in the room stand out. The girl had long black hair. There was no hair. Her hair was just down her shoulders and almost to her waist. Apparently there was other blood flowing in the girl, but also something else. Her swarthy skin nodded in the light. She was very skinny, but with beautiful and lush forms. The deep neckline on her chest indicated her best features. Ross had the suspicion that this dignity was not quite natural. Her plump lips were covered with sheer gloss. She bit her lower lip now and then as she spoke to Richard. Here the girl fixed her hair, threw her mane forward, and Ross almost gasped in surprise. The back of the dress was even more revealing than the front, completely open back to the tops of her buttocks. It gave the impression that the girl was waist deep naked. It was incredible. Ross had never seen anyone wear such a revealing dress. It left absolutely no room for imagination and fantasy. Everything was open and accessible. She had to move the chick's dress to the side, and it could do the wrong thing. Richard passionately said something to the girl, looking her straight in the eye. And the pretty girl laughed occasionally, tilting her head back or leaning forward. That made her neckline on her chest move in different directions, revealing her breasts even more. Though how much more? Ross frowned. Who was this? Only her husband's colleagues were here. But this girl looked like a photo model, not a doctor, much less a nurse. This was strange. Just then, Richard stepped away from the girl, smiling at her Ross had been waiting for. She immediately went to her husband and asked, "Who is this girl?" Richard pretended not to understand which girl. "Don't pretend, Richard. Do you know who I'm talking about? You were just standing there with a girl." "Who's that? Does she work at your clinic? Is that a girl?" "Yes, she works in our clinic. She's a doctor." "What's her name?" "Why do you need her name?" Frowning, Richard asked. Ross looked intently at her husband. There was something suspicious about his behavior. He reacts strangely to her questions. He was nervous all the time. "What did I ask?" "She is very pretty. I just wanted to know her name." "Or you don't know your colleague's name, but she came to your birthday party. Is that interesting?" Richard was getting annoyed. "What kind of nonsense are you talking? Of course I know her name. Her name is Melissa, and she didn't just show up. I invited her and she was just a little late." Melissa said thoughtfully to Ross, looking at the girl. "How old is she? She is so young." Richard answered irritably, "How do I know how old she is? I'm not interested in that at all. Probably somewhere between 20 and 25 years old. I don't know exactly. What do you care? Don't you have anything else to talk about? You amaze me, Ross." And Richard walked away from her, and Ross watched Melissa. So young and already a doctor. Isn't that strange? Her husband had to work for years to achieve success and prestige. And this Melissa, at such a young age, works in a prestigious clinic. Who put her there? Could she be someone's daughter? Melissa talked to a lot of people, and everyone was respectful. Apparently she does have credibility at that clinic, and she deserves it. Ross, I noticed something else. It was obvious that Melissa was looking for someone among the guests, and she kept looking at the little watch on her wrist as if she were in a hurry. And then Ross realized the reason for this. An hour later, Richard came up to her. It was getting late. The guests should have left by now, but it was as if everyone was waiting for something. Richard said to his wife, "Darling, here's the thing. It turns out that David has got me another present. It was a surprise and nobody knew about it. He had booked a private party at a nightclub just for the employees of the firm. He bought everyone an admission ticket, and now we are going to this party. The time, of course, is late, but I can't refuse. Unfortunately, I can't take you because you don't have a ticket. But you've never liked nightclubs, didn't you? You can lie down to rest and the guests won't bother you. It's late. We'll be leaving in a limousine that David ordered for us. That's what I'm talking about, boss. You get some rest. You need to rest. You've been a little horny lately." Ross listened to her husband in amazement. She couldn't believe her ears. A party. A nightclub. Everyone's going out. "I thought we were going to spend the rest of the evening together. I haven't given you all the presents yet. I have one more. What about me?" Ross asked. "Darling, you have to understand you, don't you? I see you every day with the boss. We rarely meet. I can't turn down a party. David would consider it a personal insult. Do you want me to get in trouble later? Aren't you unhappy with my position? And you know I should be grateful to David for being the main link in my career. If I refuse gifts from my superiors, I will quickly lose respect and trust. Those are the rules in today's world. You don't understand anything about it. What's the point? I'm telling you everything." "Really, why? You can just leave me and go off with your colleagues, and I'll wait for you till morning." "Yes." "Is that what you're going to do?" Ross flashed. Richard put his arm around her waist and whispered quietly, "Why are you so indignant?" "I'm not going to sit there till morning. I'm not going to sit there till morning. I'll stay for an hour or two and then I'll go home." "Don't worry. I won't stay there long. I just need to check in and show that I appreciate the gesture from David. And you lie down and rest. Your eyes are red. You're tired." Richard kissed his wife on the cheek and then left. 10 minutes later, there was no one else in the house. After saying goodbye, everyone left. When they went outside, Ross could hear cheering and hooting from the house. Apparently, everyone was excited about the party. It would probably be more fun there than at home. Why was this happening? Why did she increasingly find herself somewhere on the margins of her husband's life? Why is she always on the sidelines? And yet she is the wife of a prestigious surgeon. But Ross tried not to be discouraged. She still hoped for the best. Maybe it was for the best that Richard was gone. She would be able to get ready and meet him properly. She would wear the new lingerie she had bought in a fashionable women's store. Of course, the lingerie was very provocative and unusual, and she was not used to wearing it. But Zoe assured her it was exactly what she needed. Ross is just what the doctor ordered. I'm sure Richard would appreciate it. Any man would. But you're a faithful wife. So please your husband without shame. You think men don't need to be surprised? Yes, they do. So don't be a wreck. Put that kid away. And we're done talking. Ross pulled out a set. Yes, the lingerie is very pretty. She hoped she wasn't wearing it for nothing. She took a scented bubble bath, washed her hair, perfumed, and put the lingerie on. According to her calculations, as Richard had promised, he would be back. What would she be waiting for him in the bedroom? She turned on the nightlight, lay down on the bed, and waited. However, 30 minutes passed. There was no one there anymore. Another 30 minutes passed. It was about 3. Zero and Ross fell asleep. She woke up around 5. Zero Curl wasn't at home. She started calling him, but the caller was unavailable. She called him for about half an hour. There was no result, and she got worried. And then she thought about the fact that she did not have a single phone, at least someone from the clinic, to call in an extreme situation. What if something happened to him? And no one had called her. What if he's in the hospital, and she couldn't get a call? Or he got hit by a car, and he's lying on the road somewhere. God, that's awful. She had to do something right away or she would go crazy. Ross threw on her robe and was about to call the city hospital. Just then she heard some noise in the hallway. She came out and saw that it was Richard returning. Where have you been? Why didn't you call? What happened? I got all divorced while I was waiting for you. Why didn't you answer your phone? Screamed Ross. Richard raised his eyebrows and said calmly, Why are you shouting like that? I told you we were going to the club. Nothing else happened. I didn't answer the phone because the reception there is bad. And I thought you were asleep. I didn't want to wake you up or alarm you. What's so bad that you're so nervous? I'm fine. I came home. Ross paid off even more. But you said you weren't going to be late. I was waiting for you. You could have left the club and called. Would you have told me you were going to be late? You promised me you'd be here soon. How can you do this to me? Why are you making a tragedy out of it? I've stayed late many times in the morning for special cases or urgent surgeries. What's the big deal? Well, I stayed late. It's no big deal. When I'm late at work, you don't yell. So I couldn't leave. David wouldn't let me go. We had a little fun, and then we talked about things at the clinic. That's very important to me. I couldn't just get up and leave. Stop freaking out, Ross. What kind of business can you talk about in a nightclub? Do you take me for a fool? Richard took off his shirt, tossed it carelessly on the table. He smiled slightly and said quietly, Ross, you were from another world. We had rented a VIP room at the nightclub. Our company was alone. No one else was there. We would go out into the common room if we wanted to dance, but the rest of the time we sat in a special room where there was no noise and no crowds. That's where we socialized. What's so unusual about that? calm down, you're too nervous. Maybe you should see a doctor. Maybe you should see a doctor. Maybe you're going through menopause. It's very serious. Then you need help. You shouldn't joke about it. Ross looked at her husband and didn't know what to say. What menopause? She's only 38 years old. She's still young. Why would he say such things that really hurt her? She kept her eyes on Richard. He was calm. He didn't stagger around like a drunk. He was completely adequate. Sure, she's not menopausal yet, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to get her nerves fixed. She was turned on by every little thing and already felt like she was on the verge of hysteria. The eternal suspicions have driven her crazy, and she can't take it anymore. She needs to go to the doctor. Let her prescribe a sedative pill, or else she is sure to ruin her family by herself, not because of unproven cheating husband that she just suspects. After all, men who cheat, they do not behave so calmly. They lie, they twist, they make things up. They are embarrassed and nervous. But Richard is calm, smiling, and looking her in the eye. He even hums some kind of tune. Get undressed. You can tell by him that he's just relaxed and had a good time. And now he's satisfied. She was going crazy, turning herself on. What an idiot. She really needs skilled medical care. I was afraid for you. I was worried. By the way, I made a surprise for you. I put on new underwear. Quietly, Ross said, and embarrassed, untied the robe on Richard. He took a quick look at her. Immediately, with regret, looked her in the eye. Honey, that's so sweet, but I'm so tired. Let's postpone it until sometime, shall we? Not now. The night washed over me. I'm so tired my eyes are closing. If I don't go to bed right now, I'm going to fall down and fall asleep right here on the floor. So let's go to bed. We'll talk tomorrow. And Richard stuffed her robe with a kiss on the cheek and went into the bedroom. Ross remained standing, looking after him. Then she sighed and looked around her. How lonely is she in this house? How she longed to be in someone's warm embrace. How necessary it is to be needed. Why does she feel so bad? Why does she feel so bad? Why does she feel that something bad is coming? The constant anxiety drives her crazy. It's impossible to be in suspense all the time. How much more can she take? Ross drank some water, then put the glass on the table. There was a sharp knock in the silence that made her flinch. Ross went to the window and wrapped her robe tightly around her, which didn't warm her. But it didn't help her. She didn't settle down and agree. She looked out the window. There was no one outside. There was still the occasional short bark of a dog somewhere. Ross sighed and went to bed. She would have a drink, a sleeping pill, and lie down next to her soundly asleep husband. And tomorrow she would calm down and smile at her husband again, hoping for his attention. She did not know what she wanted anymore, but she felt that the denouement was near. It was as if Ross had had a premonition the day before that something was about to happen. When she got up in the morning, her husband was gone. Ross looked at her watch and grimaced. It was already 12 o'clock. She had never been up this late. Apparently the sleeping pills had taken their effect, and her head was buzzing hard. Or was it the sleepless night? Or from all the worry? Ross drank some water from the glass on the table and wanted to go back to bed. But then she saw her phone screen flashing. Someone was calling, but she couldn't hear because the phone was in frantic mode. Oh, let them call. She doesn't want to talk to anyone. She picked up the phone to turn it off altogether. But then she saw something that quickly brought her to her senses. The screen showed 10 missed calls from the detective she'd entrusted to follow her husband. And then there were 5 messages from him. Oh, he had been calling her all morning, and she was sleeping very soundly at this point. He must have had something important to call so many times. Ross immediately shook off the remnants of sleep. Her head immediately stopped humming. She dialed the detective's number and called him back. He didn't pick up the phone for a long time, and Ross was nervous, pushing the wet sheet with her wet hand. And then Steve finally answered. "I can see that you are very much looking forward to hearing from me, Ross. Good morning, or rather, the day." Ross, smiling, nervously mouthed to herself with a changing tone, "Hello, Steve. I'm sorry I've been busy. I've been very busy. I couldn't answer. Actually, I forgot my phone at home. I just got here, so I saw your calls and messages and I called you right back." Steve laughed. His laugh was frightening. It was the laugh of a man who knows other people's secrets. "Ross, you've forgotten who you're talking to, so I'll remind you I'm a detective, and I know a lot of things about all kinds of people, from everyday people to the most famous people in town. I've been sitting in my car outside your house since 700 hours. I've seen your husband leave, and I've seen that you haven't left the house or come in. Only what does that mean, that you've been home the whole time? Or could it mean that you weren't home at all? But that's unlikely. Otherwise, I'd know by the look on my husband's face that you weren't there, and since he went out in good spirits, you were therefore in your house." Ross got goosebumps, and she ran and sighed. "Yes, you're right. I was asleep. I took a sleeping pill, I put my phone on silent, and I slept until noon. I just woke up now and saw that you had called me. I'm sorry for this pointless and stupid lie." "No, you're not. You don't have to apologize to me. I just showed you that you can make fun of any little thing in front of other people. Once you've lied to them, always be careful. Either don't lie, or only lie when you're sure your lie won't reveal itself." Ross stared at one point and listened to the detective. What a strange man, but his voice was mesmerizing. Ross felt calm, as if she had been in a hypnosis session. She exhaled slowly. "All right, let's get this over with. I think you understood me correctly and will apply the connoisseur's advice in the future. Now let's talk about the present. I'm ready to give you my report. I think I've gathered enough information for you, and I would like you to read it as soon as possible. I have a client who urgently needs my help. I've taken care of your case, and I'd like to get on to the next one as soon as possible. I'll meet you in the car in half an hour. I think that should give you enough time to shower, clean up, and have coffee." "That's great. I'll wait for you outside." Ross looked out the window. There were no cars nearby. Strange man. But Ross didn't dwell on his strangeness. She was more concerned with the information the detective had gleaned for her, something about the end or continuation of her family life, or all around is a lie, and the detective once again will convince her of that. Either way, she would soon find out. So Ross quickly went to take a shower. She went outside after 20 minutes. Her head stopped humming after the shower as she drank a strong coffee. Ross looked around and saw a car not far away. Headlights flashed, and then the car moved and pulled up close to Ross. The door to the front of the car opened and Ross sat down next to the driver. "Hello, Ross. You look beautiful." Ross grimaced. "You've learned everything I asked for. I still haven't had breakfast. Let's go to a place where I was walking. And you look at my materials, and no one will disturb us." 25 minutes later, they were already sitting at a table in the cafe, where students usually go to get something to eat. They were seated in a corner where they could hardly be seen. Steve brought the tray of food himself, and then he put the file in front of Ross. The woman took a deep breath before opening it. There were a lot of papers, handwritten in a steady handwriting. Strange that the detective didn't use a computer, or maybe he wrote everything himself on purpose to pad his price. And there were a lot of pictures of varying quality. Ross's trembling hands picked up one of them. In this picture, Richard was wearing a white medical suit. He was standing on the threshold of the clinic. Beside him stood a girl with long black hair. Apparently they were talking. Richard smiled as he looked at his companion. Ross put the photo aside and took the next picture. Here the girl was already turned on her face. She was wearing huge black glasses. Ross did not know who it was. Taking the next picture, Ross saw Richard in a restaurant. On the table next to his hand was a long red rose. Richard was a lone red rose. Richard was alone, but his thoughtful look indicated that he was waiting for someone. And the next picture put everything in its place. It was also taken at the cafe. Only now Richard and the woman with the dark hair were sitting at the table. And Ross saw the girl's face. It was Melissa, an employee of the clinic and a doctor. She was wearing a revealing dress that exposed her artificial breasts. Melissa was holding a rose and smiling softly at Richard. Ross looked up at the detective. He was nonchalantly devouring his breakfast. "This is the doctor from her husband's clinic." For some reason, she told him. The detective looked at her, lived, took a sip of water and said, "She doesn't work at the clinic." "How doesn't she work?" "She told me that." "Your husband told me that?" "Your husband told me that she works as a doctor at the clinic." "I understood that. But she doesn't. Although she does have something to do with the clinic." The detective stared at Ross and remained silent. The woman was beginning to lose patience. "And what does she have to do with it?" Steve said quietly, "This is Melissa, wife of the owner of the clinic, David." There was silence. Ross looked at the picture again. David's wife. That's how. Richard was bullshitting her. He brought this girl into their house, not even afraid that Ross might find out something about their relationship. The detective got comfortable, sat back in his chair, and kept talking. "Melissa, she is 23 years old. Your husband has been in a relationship with her for 2 years. No one knows about their relationship. These pictures were taken in a restaurant in the VIP room, where outsiders are not allowed. Don't ask me how I got these pictures. That is my business and my secrets. I had to do my job, and I did it. How do I know they have been in a relationship for 2 years? Don't ask me that either. I won't tell you that either. But they've been lovers for a long time. As a fact, the husband doesn't know about the double life. Ross, it turns out you didn't know either. The couple are often together in the same hotel, where they keep complete secrecy. David often travels to different cities and countries. When he is away, your husband is often at Melissa's house. I caught a moment like that. There is a photo. Look, your husband is of course in disguise. But I know it is him, and you will recognize him, I am sure. She pulled out the next picture in front of the big mansion. A cab pulled up, and there was a man standing next to the car, wearing sunglasses. It was Richard. This is the picture I took before your husband's birthday. The next picture. Look here, your husband is carrying a dress from a fancy store in a case. He came to his mistress to give her the dress. This is the dress she was wearing at your house. This next picture is from Saturday, yesterday afternoon. The entire company of friends who were at your party. Tell me, what did your husband say to you yesterday when he left with everyone else and you stayed home? Ross whispered, barely audible, looking at the pictures. He said that David had surprised him, that they were going to a nightclub to have fun and socialize with their colleagues, and that only tickets were allowed. And they wouldn't let me in. The detective smirked, though his expression was sympathetic. Did your husband get around and you didn't notice it? They did go to a nightclub together, but it was your husband who threw the party, not David. You didn't have to go in with an invitation card. It was free. And Richard wasn't there for very long. Half an hour later, he and Melissa left for the hotel, where they stayed until almost morning. Ross, your husband was with his mistress all night. As soon as he left the hotel, I immediately printed out the pictures and arrived at your house. Ross was crushed. Such betrayal from the man she had lived with for so long had not been expected. She was not prepared for this. She squeezed her eyes shut to keep the tears from streaming down her cheeks. But that didn't help. "Wait a minute. Excuse me, I have to go away," she said, getting up from the table. She didn't know how she found the bathroom, but she did. She cried so hard but immediately stopped herself. What she does. She has been deceived, betrayed, trampled on, destroyed, and she is crying. She needs to pull herself together. She needs to decide what to do next. And then she thought of Leo. The way he had looked at her when they had accidentally met. That look spoke volumes. Richard hadn't had that look to Ross in a long time. But in the pictures, she recognized that look only now. Richard looked that way at another woman, Melissa, his boss's wife. Ross looked at herself in the mirror. There was nothing more she could do. Her marriage ended today. It ended the moment she saw the pictures of Richard and his mistress. Ross washed her face, then carefully wiped her face with a handkerchief she pulled from her purse, taking a deep breath. She put on her sunglasses and then left the bathroom. She returned to the table. The detective frowned when he saw her wearing the sunglasses, but didn't say anything to her. He liked it better when people weren't wearing glasses, so he could watch their reactions. People loved drama. His clients would act out entire performances when they found out about a betrayal or deception, and Ross was different. She chose to hide her emotions by hiding in the bathroom. All the papers are in a folder with various dating data. Also, all the information about Melissa is in there, and you have not yet seen the photos from the hotel, which were taken at night. "Very interesting ones turned out," said the detective. Ross interrupted him. "I've got it all figured out. Thank you for your service. I am very pleased with your work. How much do I owe you?" "I don't have much cash on me, but I can transfer the required amount to your card," Ross said in an even tone. The detective lowered his gaze. "I am pleased with my work too. I've never been able to get all the information I need so quickly. And you don't owe me anything. I did it for you for nothing. Don't ask me why. There is a reason, but I'm not going to tell you one. I'm sorry. Everything I have learned and obtained is in this folder. I gave it to you. I hope we won't meet again. My services are very expensive, but I wouldn't want to charge you money. So I hope you won't need my services. No, I won't need anything else. I'll be gone soon. I'll be gone forever." The detective raised one eyebrow. The woman continued to amaze him. You could tell from her first meeting that she hoped her suspicions wouldn't come true. But she quickly came to terms with the circumstances. She would build her life anew. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. You've been very helpful. I won't discourage you from giving up your money. I can see that your decision is final. Good luck to you. Goodbye, said Ross. She gathered all the papers and pictures into a folder. Then she got up and left. The detective looked after her thoughtfully. Ross hailed a cab while she waited for the car. She thought about what she was going to do next. She was going to get revenge on the man she loved, trusted, to whom she had given the best years of her life. The decision came suddenly as she looked at herself in the mirror, in the bathroom. It wasn't all of this that she deserved to be happy. No one could run her life but herself. When Ross arrived home, Richard greeted her. Where have you been? Traveling on business. So? Richard shrugged his shoulders. Nothing, I'm going to go work in my office. And then I'll have to go away on business. I'll be back late. And Richard sat down at the computer. Ross had already thought of it. What revenge it would be when her husband left on his business. She would put her plan into action. She sat down in the bedroom, pulled out the folder the detective had given her. She looked through the pictures she hadn't seen. They were from the hotel. She didn't look at them for long because she became disgusted. She hurriedly stuffed them into a folder. And then she saw a small flash drive. She slipped it into her personal laptop, and the flash drive were all the pictures the detective had provided her. Well, does that make it easier for her? After a couple of hours, Richard left. Before that, he took a shower. Ross realized that he was on his way to Melissa's. Now she was noticing everything. After he left, Ross went to his office. She opened his email account. There she found this folder. Here are the mail addresses, all the clinic staff, and most importantly, David's address. Well, it's time to start having fun. Let's see how you like it, Richard. Out loud, Ross said, and uploaded all the pictures of Melissa, and Richard sent them out to all the clinic staff. But then she didn't think that was enough and sent the photos to all her contacts. All business was done. Richard arrived in 300 hours. It was already late evening. He didn't say anything to his wife. It was obvious that no one had called him yet, but that meant everything would be known tomorrow. Her husband went to bed, and Ross sat in the kitchen for a long time. She put a chair by the window. The woman drank coffee, looked out the window, and thought about her life. In the morning, Richard left for work, and half an hour later he called her. "Ross, I'm in big trouble," he yelled when she answered his call. "What do you mean?" Ross asked calmly. "Can't you even imagine what happened?" "What's the matter?" "Explain it to me," Richard shouted into the tube. "I've been set up by everyone. God, everyone got some weird photoshopped pictures. Someone had hacked into my email and sent provocative pictures to everyone at the clinic, and not just the staff. God, this is a nightmare. What's going on here?" Richard said something else, but Ross didn't listen to him much. And then she said quietly, "I did it." What did you say?" "I didn't understand." Ross said louder. "I did it, Richard. I sent those pictures out. And you know they're not fake, right?" "I know they're not fake, right? I know the whole truth, Richard. And now you're going to pay for everything you've done." After a moment, Richard shouted at Ross, "What have you done, fool? Where did you get those pictures? What kind of creature slandered me? You know, none of this is true." "Really? It's not true." "It's a lie, you mean. It's the same lie that Melissa is a doctor at the clinic. I know who she is, David's wife. I only have 2 questions for you. How could you bring a mistress into our house? And why didn't you just divorce me if you didn't want me anymore? If we had just broken up, none of this would have happened. But you've been cheekily lying to me for years. You slept with this young girl while I waited for you every day at home. You mocked me, said hurtful words, once you were ready to carry me in your arms. Why? When things changed, you just didn't talk to me. We would have broken up by mutual consent, and you just violated my trust. You're a scoundrel, Richard, and I don't regret it one bit. Let everyone know who it really is. And most importantly, let David know about it. I think he'll do the right thing by you." And Ross hung up. Richard heard the ringing tone and threw his phone against the wall, shattered into several pieces all over the office. Richard roared again like a wounded animal and slumped back in his chair. He closed his eyes and rested his head on the chair. He came to work today in a good mood. Many colleagues whispered behind his back. A few did not even say hello. And his assistant looked at him frightened. "What happened on the iPad today? I missed something interesting. Everyone is acting so weird." "Fun?" asked Richard when he got to his office. But the assistant was not as cheerful as before. She mumbled confusedly, "Oh, Richard, I can't. I don't know what to tell you. In fact, I prefer not to participate in any gossip. I'll go and you call me if you need anything." She stormed out of the office. Richard shrugged his shoulders. What was the matter with everyone today? But half an hour later, David came into his office. Richard smiled affably. When he saw the chief, he held out his hand to greet him, but instead of a handshake, he got punched in the face. And then David told him everything he thought of him. And Richard realized that he had somehow found out about him and Melissa. But that wasn't all. At the end, the chief said, "You don't work here anymore. You're fired. I did a favor for a friend. I hired you, gave you patience, gave you a big paycheck, and you bitch. You spit in my face. You take away what's mine. You humiliated me. Nobody touches my wife, and you dare touch her. Now you're nobody here, you can't get anywhere. I'll ruin your reputation so that no man will want to work with you. I got a lot of credibility. I'll make it so you can't work in any town ever again. They won't even hire you as an orderly. You hear me? You signed your own death warrant. I don't know who played a joke on you, sending those pictures to everyone in your mail, but I'm glad that person was found. Now everyone will know that you are the last scum. Get your things and get out of here. I don't want you here in an hour." And David left, slamming the door. So that Richard's certificate flew off the wall, immediately opened his laptop, looked at his mail. There were a bunch of messages sent to all his contacts. Richard suppressed a groan and opened one of the messages. There he saw a picture of himself and Melissa. Someone had done this nasty thing and ruined his life. And that someone turned out to be his own wife. This is a complete failure, a fiasco. "Bro," whispered Richard. While he was packing up his office, not a single person came in. The surgery scheduled for that day would apparently be done by someone else, most likely his rival. Well, what a great end to his career. When he left the clinic, not a single person looked in his direction. No one said goodbye to him. No one even supported him with a goodbye handshake. Everyone smiled in his face when he was a successful surgeon, and everyone turned away when he refused to get dirty. Ross, meanwhile, was packing her things. She made quick work of it by hailing a cab. She took one last look around her home where she was happy and unhappy. Never again would she cross the threshold of this house. It was no longer their family nest. It was just a house, an ordinary house in which maybe soon another family will live. Maybe they will be happier here than Ross and Richard. Ross went to the hotel. After getting a room, she immediately called Zoe, telling her everything. Zoe quickly realized that she needed help. But Ross only asked for the number of a lawyer. "I'm filing for divorce, Zoe, and I'm going to start a new life. Don't worry, I'm fine. I'm even better now than I was. So don't worry, I just have a few things to work out, and then I'll tell you everything in order." Ross called a lawyer, solved a few questions about the divorce. Tomorrow she will go to court with him, write a power of attorney, do everything to make sure the divorce goes through without her being in court. Everything could be done with money, and she had plenty of money, thank God. She had a personal account where Richard regularly deposited large sums, and Ross never spent much of it. There was a goodly sum accumulated there. She had enough for the first time, and then she would have another life. She would take care of it. She picked up the phone again and called someone. No one answered. She called another number, also no answer. Ross sighed and dialed the last number. On the third ring, she got an answer. "Hello, Leo." "It's me. Did you recognize me?" "Of course I did." "Leo, I'm calling to say I'm getting a divorce. I'm leaving my husband. He betrayed me. I can't be in this town anymore. Say what you said still stands. Then I agree. Leo, I want to see you as soon as possible. How stupid I've been, Leo. Forgive me. Richard has been standing at the window in his house for a week. He hasn't left the house. His home phone was ringing off the hook with calls. Eventually, he smashed the receiver. Now there was silence in the house. His new cell phone was on regular mode. There were hundreds of missed calls and messages, too. But Richard was answering a personal unit. Through messages, he learned that Ross had filed for divorce. Melissa called him only once the day after it happened. She screamed into the phone, "David kicked me out of Richard's house. Can you imagine? He kicked me out in disgrace. He took all the jewelry. He took everything. I'm penniless. A friend took me in. I'm shocked. How could this happen? Who followed us? Did David suspect anything? It was my wife. Somehow she found out about us. Your wife. Are you kidding me? The bitch is a bitch. She ruined my life. God, what am I going to do now? I got nothing. How am I going to live? What shame. What horror. Richard tried to reassure his mistress. Calm down, Melissa. Don't worry. Everything will work out. Come to my place. My wife has left, filed for divorce. Can you live with me now? Should I live with you? Are you out of your mind? Who are you? A doctor who can't even work anymore. You're nothing without me. You're nothing. You're nothing. You've ruined everything. You and your dead wife. Go to hell. I don't want anything more to do with you, do you hear? You don't exist to me anymore. I won't even say goodbye. Get out of my life, and she hung up. Richard gently put the phone on the table. He just bought it. It couldn't be broken. Now he has to think about the fact that he has no more income. What's he going to do next? What's he going to do next? He didn't know. He closed his eyes with resentment and powerlessness. A month passed. Ross was standing at the airport. She had just arrived. She couldn't believe she was in Paris. She had never been to Europe. And here was Paris. God, she was afraid to move. Ross looked around and suddenly saw someone ahead. She smiled timidly but could not move. Leo, with a huge bouquet of flowers, came close to her. He smiled, looking into her eyes. Hello, madam. I'm very glad to see you. I must have waited for this moment all my life. May I have your hand? I will show you Paris. Ross hugged him tightly around the neck and closed her eyes. You've never been anywhere. I have not been to France. Why not? I feel as if I have come home. Leo put his arms around her and whispered in her ear, You've never been anywhere. Then, my love, I would love to show you around the world. We have our whole lives ahead of us. Ross squeezed even tighter on the shoulders of the man who had once taken a place in her heart and never left there. Yes, we will. She doesn't doubt it.